Item 12.
I'll move.
Another enthusiastic mover of a recommendation.
Two there.
Look, I'll second that. I don't know whether there needs to be much discussion. Councillors, so just a little bit of context here. As you know, this has been going around. And just for those of you who weren't at the briefing, and for the fact that this is a public forum, it's important to remind the community that this matter, which continues to be a live request for reorganisation in the North Rodney area, will now be the subject of a process whereby the parties will meet and exchange views. And look, I look forward to that. I actually think it's better than lining up in court, quite frankly, on these things.
Yeah.
Because in the end, it's been between communities. And there's another part of our community that's feeling a little sort of unloved or otherwise, rightly or wrongly, and that's Waiheke. And my view is that we basically involve them in a not dissimilar ad hoc process, rather than wait for someone or other to slap an application in. Well, let's just deal with it. If there's a problem, let's try and work out what the facts are, what the real problem is, and then see if we can't resolve it before things go further in front of a judge. So I think we're a Gardner and as a local government commission, probably out of desperation, quite frankly, have actually made a good choice and recommendation to us, and will give us, and particularly local council and local board, an opportunity to, to engage in a more collegial way. So it's moved and seconded. I think Councillor George, you want to say something, and Councillor Linden?
Yeah, I've just been through the submission, Mr Mayor. The areas that I want to focus on, which I don't think have been put into this report, and I know he's going to write these down, but firstly, under the heading of ATEED, there's no mention of ATEED or any of the, or ATEED in this document. And if you're looking at this connovation, or whatever you'd say, that this new TLA they're talking about, they're talking about this 20,000, we're talking about 20,000 extra people living in Warkworth, I think in the next 30 years. The first thing I look at there is jobs, and that's a huge issue across the Auckland region. And ATEED, which is a CCO of Auckland Council, got very close ties with other organisations. Surely they would be mentioned in this document, because I can't see, how a standalone council would be able to function to the same extent as if without being able to log into to ATEED. No, is it mentioned in the document? I didn't see it there. So ATEED's got a close relationship with NZ Trade and Enterprise. Jobs are not sufficient to provide for the 20,000 people there in the next 30 years. So there's going to have to be a huge transformation of this area in relation to jobs. And I think the local board's always talked about the tourism industry, so that's one of the areas that I'd say ATEED would be in a very good position. And ATEED only operates within the Auckland Council area, so that would be an issue that should be raised in this submission. Then I go to transport. Auckland Council has a transport agency which is standalone but operates on enabling statutory provisions, and its emphasis is on the widest range of areas in relation to transport. And if you're looking at 20,000 extra people in Warkworth, obviously that will be a big issue that I think the local government commission should be fully aware of. So hopefully we can put something in the document about that. I think the busway, and Councillor Webster was talking about it just the other day, about I think it was a busway to Warkworth, and I agree with that in the future. And I think that we've already moved. This council's already moved to Silverdale, and with the Northern Express going to Silverdale, so that's only a natural progression, is to take that through to Warkworth. So I think that should go into the document and be really emphasised in a heading. And then there's the maintenance of the natural environment. I just, and I just think that's got to be emphasised more in this document as well, because I think a standalone council, which is a small organisation that we're talking about here, wouldn't have the support which is necessary to cover these issues. And I think, you might go look at the Kaipara Council and the wastewater treatment plant that they put in at Mangawai to see the costs and those issues. So I think that should be emphasised. And there's issues such as stormwater. That's obviously one that would be part of that natural environment. But there's also the area of solid waste. I think Auckland Council have with a zero waste target or aim by 2040. That's something which by economies of scale, that can be achieved. I think if they stay with Auckland is important. So I think those should be put into the document. And then, of course, Panuku Development Auckland is another aspect that should be, I think, put in the document as well, because with this upscaling of Warkworth in a pretty massive way, which I think will happen, I think Panuku, an organisation like Panuku Development Auckland, which with its experience that it'll gain by the work that they're going to be doing at different areas of Auckland, across the Auckland region, I think would be a massive boost to an area such as Warkworth, which they won't have if they go into the new North Rodney Unitary Council concept. Thank you.
Right. Phil, you note all those matters?
Your Worship, I think as long as if you enable me to make some minor amendments to the final submission, we'll take account of that feedback. I would just make the point, this submission is not a full litigation of all of the arguments around the NAG proposal. What it is a request from the Local Government Commission to give some specific examples by way of illustration about the operational impacts of separating the people out. So Councillor Wood, we deliberately haven't attempted to try and traverse every implication of this, but I take the feedback on board, and we will make some tweaks here with your authorisation.
And look, also Phil and Councillor George, I mean, a lot of that stuff, once we get face to face, we'll really start teasing it out.
Yeah, I know, but if it's not on paper, Your Worship,
No,
it's not
but
in I think it should be in the submission.
Well, hang on.
Yeah.
Councillor George, we've had reasonable advice, so let's just leave it at that. Right, Councillor Linda.
Thank you. Supports a lot of the things that Councillor Wood said, because it is, if you separate out, it's just not sustainable. We know places like Dargaville, they just cannot rate enough to deal with everything, and I think there's going to be a lot of, as we know, a lot of small councils across the country that don't want to amalgamate, but the reality is it's just not sustainable with small numbers to be able to meet the infrastructure needs, and that's the trade-off that we've all had to make, which is kind of sad in some ways, but it's the reality when you're trying to fund growth even in rural areas. There's still things needed. So for me, looking at the local board plans and the things they've done, it's really heartening to see. They've got a lot, they've been doing a lot in North Rodney, and I'm due respect to the previous Mayor of Rodney, I don't imagine they had the capacity to focus on small areas like this that the local board can do. And that's another reason why I voted for land area to be included in the capital money that was given to local boards in the divvy up, because there are absolutely unique issues in rural areas. There's so many communities and so far flung that you can't expect everybody to go such a long way just to go to a hall or library, things like that. So I see that sort of treatment of CapEx delivery has to be done for rural areas, and that makes such a big difference to them. And I think that if you look at the youth connection stuff that's listed here, that's connected with AT. So I actually think we can do better for our rural communities, and this is a bit of a wake-up call. But I also think it's for the that community. If we can get round the table with them rather than taking people to court, which is never a good use of money or time, maybe we can start to work with that community and have them have some more faith in what we as a governing body and the local board can do for them and look after them. So I guess this is a beginning, and I hope that we can come to some good understanding and make sure our rural communities are looked after. Thank you.
Councillor Dick.
Good submission.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it's my understanding that this is really a document which describes the impact on Auckland Council, and if the amalgam or the de-amalgamation, if I could use that word, was to take place. So I'm quite happy with this document. Some of the things that I'm surprised that Pocono has been mentioned as a negative impact or an example of a negative impact. It would seem to me that the community that are buying houses as fast as they can build them down at Pocono perhaps don't see it that way. But look, I'm quite comfortable with this document, pointing out what the impact on Auckland Council services would be if this was to if this de-amalgamation were to go ahead.
Very good, thank you. Councillor Penny H.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I apologise, I may have just drifted away for a second. I was reading the submission. I think Councillor Wood made some excellent points, and the bit that worries me is just the process. I think it's fantastic that we're going out and we're going to have this kind of rational round the table discussion. I think that's an excellent suggestion and supported wholeheartedly. Whilst we're in this process, and it shows in the reorganisation diagram that we're in the is there a demonstrable community support, blah blah. I'm a Rodney ratepayer. No one has asked me, no one's talked to me, I've had no information. The last thing I want is to de-amalgamate and see my rates double. So somewhere in here is that wider discussion with the community. So I note that it may well require the applicant, or whatever they're called, to go out and determine support or non-support. Will that be part of this next stage of discussion?
Through the Mayor, what this does is inform the local government commission's decision as to the affected area, and once they've done that, that gives direction, if you like, to the scope of their efforts to establish what the level of support is.
Okay. And
It might be North Rodney, it might be the broader Rodney area, or it might be the entire region, and this is what this work informs.
Okay. So, Mr. Mayor, as part of that, I think I'd just like to acknowledge our local board and our local Rodney representative, who at the moment are going through a pretty torrid time with some factually misleading information that's appearing in local newsletters and in local rags. And whilst we cannot skew the process and we need to be hands-off, I hope that we are working wherever possible to get the correct information out there, because in Councillor Penny Webster's defence, as a hard-working councillor in the area, she's facing a barrage of misinformation around this by electoral hopefuls in the area that are somewhat unfair.
So I guess the one thing that the Local Government Commission really have proposed this for is to enable the council to, in the best way that they possibly can, just provide the facts.
Yep.
And NAG will provide the facts as they see them. We hope that the truth will out between that, and that'll give the community a bit of a lead, and the Local Government Commission. Councillor John Watson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And yeah, I understand the restrictions of the council's response, and they've obviously been covered off fairly well. You know, they sort of essentially concentrate around the future development needs of Auckland and money that's been invested thus far, though I guess the people ironically enough, might say up there that one of the reasons for them being included was to kind of ensure that Auckland's development didn't spread, or at least didn't spread in inappropriate ways to that sort of area. I mean, that was one of the rationales for them being included. We've got reference to the costs of new core, costs of breaking maintenance contracts, library reorganisation, work done by the Rodney Board and so forth, which are all, as you quite rightly point out, the operational matters. I guess, Mr Mayor, and it's certainly not the scope of this response, but it would be sort of remiss, I think, not to perhaps to examine perhaps the wider issue that's maybe at stake here, because people's notion of governance, and this is essentially what this comes down to, isn't often neatly confined just to, you know, a financial balance sheet or work done. Often it's a little more intangible than that, and I suspect that's the case here, you know, where people like to have a feeling, especially, you know, the further out you go, of being in control of their own destiny and making decisions that are important to them. And I know that the local board up there certainly work very hard to try and ensure that's the case. And as I said, this isn't obviously the time or the mechanism to confront this, but you would hope it would come up soon, you know, this notion of review. And I know it's been brought up previously that, you know, 5 years in, communities like this and other communities are really starting to get into a position where they can make a reasonably educated assessment of how things have worked for them. And that should really be a government function. I think they set it up. They should perhaps pay for that region-wide review that can guide the council. But I guess I just would like to make the point in the overall context that, you know, where you get decisions that go against local communities, local boards, and councillors, when you get all those three things coming together, while that might, on the face of it, appear to be confined to one part of the Auckland region, that has a ripple-on effect, and that certainly doesn't do the council's image or its participation in matters like this a lot of credence, because people can point to specific examples where things aren't working in a governance sense. So I just leave that as a parting shot. I commend the report writers, but I would like to see a wider review where you really get a sense of the voice of people around Auckland, because I think you might get a surprise. Thank you.
Oh, look, I don't think